Hi, how are you today? I hope everybody is doing well. I hope the world is treating you well and not crushing you under the weight of horribleness. So, as promised, today we are going to talk about haunted house movies. This is one of my favorites. This list, so I've got 20 movies here for you to talk about. I'm more excited about next week when we talk about books, but this is one of my favorite parts of the horror genre. Haunted houses. There's always a lot of gothic influence that goes into it. There's always a lot of just really wonderful scenery and imagery, atmosphere that has to do with these, and I love it. So, I think one of the things, at least for me, that really gets to me about the whole haunted house aspect is I'm a homebody. I very much prefer to be home. I prefer it right here. This is where I'm okay. And the thought of your safe place, your recharging station, sort of being not good for you, being not safe, not a place where you can recharge, having that taken away from you is horrible for your physical and mental health. In a real world aspect of it, think of how bad it is having your home life being bad through abuse or toxic relationships, toxic people, when you can't go home to get away from the world and have it be okay, where going home is not a good thing. And I think that's something that gets to me, that's something that bothers me, and that's why I like it, because in the haunted house story, a lot of times there's a fight to regain that safe place. These people are fighting to expel the thing that is doing harm and to regain that safe space. Not all the time. A lot of people take a lot of different approaches to the haunted house trope, which I really enjoy. I actually like them all. But for me personally, the thing that gets to me is not having your safe space, not being able to have that place where you can escape the world and just be yourself. It's being intruded upon by something that is out to do you harm. And I just think that's crazy. I think that's actually bothersome. So let's get started. The first on this list I have is Rebecca. The movie was made in 1940. It stars Laurence Olivier and Joan Fontaine. And it's based on a Daphne du Maurier story. And this is one where it's gothic as hell. Like, first of all, great. This is one where, is it haunted or is it not? Is it all in her head? Like, haunted house stories also really love doing the thing where, is the person who claims to be haunted, are you crazy? Are you a crazy lady? It's usually women who maybe it's a psychological thing where she's having a breakdown, or maybe there actually is a haunting going on. Now in this one, she's living in the shadow of her husband, her new husband's first wife, Rebecca. And you have to just kind of get through it. This, I know they remade the movie. I haven't watched it, but this one is a fine movie, especially for 1940. The tension and the kind of vileness of characters. There were things that they had to kind of dance around content-wise, because the censors would have shit their pants if they talked about it, but you still get it. Like, they're actually really smart about how they talk about these things. This is a really good movie. Let's jump to from all the way from 1940 to 1961. This is also a black and white movie. This movie is called The Innocents. Now, this movie, what's really interesting about it is it's based on Henry James's book, The Turn of the Screw. But the screenplay for this movie was written by Truman Capote. And like Henry James's Turn of the Screw, it's a very gothic story, haunted, but very, very gothic, very atmospheric. And Truman Capote he really punched it up for The Innocents. This is, another one where, is the woman being hysterical? Is the governess is she projecting stuff onto these children that she's tasked with overseeing. And it's a good movie. The tension is fantastic. And I think sometimes you're not expecting certain levels of intensity from a black and white movie. And when you're not expecting it and it happens, it's like, oh, it's a delight for a horror fan. This movie comes out of nowhere for you sometimes. It's a very good movie. 1963, The Haunting. This is just like, it's a scary, haunted house movie. This one is it's based on Shirley Jackson's book. Shirley Jackson's book, The Haunting of Hill House. And I'm sorry, I blanked. I'm sorry. And this one, I think it's the first movie adaptation. There have been a whole bunch of movie adaptations of Shirley Jackson's book, but this one was the first. And I mean, it's a good book. It's a good book. Of course it's a good book, but it's a good movie. It's, I think it glosses over some of the more kind of saturated, intense scenes that you get in the book. They kind of soften it a little bit. It's almost like watching someone jump off the roof of a building, but they land on one of those big air-filled stunt pillows. It kind of takes away some of the punchiness to it. Like, of course, I don't want to see somebody jump off a building, but The Haunting, this is a movie that it really softened the source material. Now, having said that, it is still a very much haunted movie. It's still, you get the whole... A haunted house movie has to be atmospheric. The setting is one of the characters in the film. And this one does a really good job of it. They had a lot of fun with it. You can see that. They take it very seriously, but you can see they had a lot of fun with what the setting does to the characters. So it's a good movie. Absolutely recommend. It's not my favorite on the list, but it's one you gotta watch. So, okay, let's jump forward another decade, 1973, The Legend of Hell House. Now, we'll talk about Shirley Jackson and Richard Matheson, their two books, next week. This is based off Richard Matheson's book, Hell House. And it's very similar in concept to Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. Very similar in concept. I once heard someone describe it as Hell House is The Haunting of Hill House grown up. And yeah, I can see that. It's a little more brutal. It's a little more graphic. And for my money, I like Hell House a little bit better than Hill House, while also admitting it's a fantastic book. So, it's apples and oranges. Now, The Legend of Hell House, this is a great movie. This is also a movie where they had to gloss over some things because the book really is very graphic. Now, this is 1973. This is a British-made movie. And it's what's amazing about it is it's a very tiny cast. And they do such a good job of that feeling of isolation, that feeling of being lost, that feeling of being stuck. And it's so good. They leave out so much of what was scary about Hell House. They hint, because they can only hint. There's a lot of stuff, like, they would put it in movies today, but in 1973, they hint just enough that you're like, well, what's that mean? It intrigues you to want to read the book. But the movie itself is fantastic. I think Roddy McDowall did such a good job in this. Everybody did a fantastic job, but the ending parts where he's confronting the entity, it's fantastic. This is a great movie. All right, 1976, Burnt Offerings. I just saw this movie for the first time a few weeks ago. I watched it for the Ghostwriters podcast, and honestly, I watched it because of Oliver Reed. I love me some Ollie Reed. And this movie was really good. This movie was really intense. This one takes a kind of different approach to the haunted house. So we definitely have something going on inside this house. Is it a haunting? There's some sort of energy suck going on. There's some sort of taking over of certain characters in this. There's something definitely going on with the house. And it's creepy. And it's intense. And there's a scene where Oliver Reed, who was a bear of a man, is kind of assaulting this kid in a swimming pool. Like, they were play wrestling at first, and then it gets real for a second, and it's unsettling to watch because they went for it. I'm sure, you know, the kid was fine, but it's unsettling to watch because this isn't, you know, a live, you know, slender actor going for it. This is Oliver Reed who could have put anybody on their butt going for it with a small kid. It's an unsettling scene. The ending is unsettling because, woo, I didn't expect it to go there. 1979, The Amityville Horror. This is a movie that is all kinds of corny, that I think they took it too seriously. We'll talk about the story itself next week when I talk about the book, because I'm going to talk about the book. But this is all kinds of corny. I have a certain soft spot in my heart for it because, oh God, Margot Kidder really goes for it. Really, really goes for it. James Brolin, though, is kind of low-key great in this film. In this role, he's actually brilliant. And I don't think he gets enough credit for it because the rest of the movie is so goddamn cheesy. But it's fun cheesy. This is a movie that really, again, with the setting, again, with the atmosphere, with the house kind of attacking the characters, that looked like they had fun with it, but it's a little too serious for my liking. If they'd been just a little more over the top and been like, okay, we get it, this is cheesy, we're not taking it too seriously, I think the movie would have been better. But we'll talk about the story more next week. I do think it's a good movie. I think it's a fun movie if you're in the mood for a haunted house and you don't actually think this shit happened. Okay. 1980, The Changeling. This movie is probably, seriously, probably my favorite on the list. This movie's so fucking good. George C. Scott is one of those actors who was from a certain time where possibly overacting was the norm. And he turned it not into overacting, but into this very pointed intensity to where you're completely sucked in to what he's thinking and what he's doing. And this is a one where it's a historical mansion and there's stuff going on and research has to be done. I love haunted house movies where research has to be done to get to the bottom of something. I'm not going to tell you too much about this movie because this is one, it's really better if you go in totally cold. If you've never seen it, don't read up on it. Don't read up on anything about it. Just sit and watch it, and just, you're going to have to sit in it afterwards. You're going to have to just sit and stare at a wall when it's done. This movie is so good, so understated, and yet not. It's wonderful. So, also 1980, The Shining. Now, this is a movie, if it weren't claiming to be based on a book, I think I would like it better. If it were called something else, I think I would like it better. This movie does a really good job of the whole stuck premise. And that's a thing about haunted house movies that's really good, is you're in there, you're stuck, you're not going anywhere. You have to deal with this. And escape is a big hope for the people in this movie, for the characters in The Shining. I just, as someone who likes Stephen King's book, The Shining, I got problems with this movie. But if I take the movie just as a movie, not based on the book, it's actually very effective. It's got imagery that's amazing. Conversations, like creepy conversations, where you can watch someone losing their mind. You can watch someone losing their ability to feel for the people in their family. It's a good movie if you don't try to tell me it's based on the book. All right, 1982, Poltergeist. Now, what I like about this movie is it is an effective haunted house movie. It is an effective ghost story, but it's also kind of family friendly. This is a movie that is technically directed by Tobe Hooper. If you've ever seen a Tobe Hooper movie, you're going, hey, this looks like a Steven Spielberg movie. And so this is produced by Steven Spielberg, but if you read up the trivia on it, Tobe Hooper will tell you Steven Spielberg was very involved with the making of this movie. He wasn't just looking at the numbers or saying, hey, how's it going? He was very involved with how the story was going to play out, with how it was shot. And it's nice that Tobe Hooper got the credit, but it's also kind of very obvious this is a Steven Spielberg movie. And that's fine. You know, I like Steven Spielberg. I love Tobe Hooper, but I like Steven Spielberg, and I really think this is a good movie. This is a movie I've been watching with my kids forever. My kids love this movie. I love this movie. We're not going to talk about the remake. The only Poltergeist movie I recognize is the one made in 1982 with Craig T. Nelson and Jo Beth Williams. This is a fantastic movie. Beetlejuice, 1988. We've got to talk about Beetlejuice. This is a haunted house movie. There's a lot more to it, supernatural-wise, but this is a haunted house movie. How can you not love this movie? How can you not love all the characters? Like, I'm trying to pick out which one I love the most, but I love them all. Yeah. Like, baby Winona Ryder is actually kind of amazing in this. I mean, Michael Keaton, amazing. Gina Davis, amazing. Young Alec Baldwin, let me tell you, he could get it. Oh my God. He's kind of a rage monster now, but he's fantastic in this movie. And then we've got the Dietzes, oh my God. The townspeople, like, I just love this movie. I can't imagine you haven't seen it. You've seen it. I rewatch it every year. The scenery, oh my God, the Tim Burton scenery that is so, like, we recognize it now. We know it. You know, no vertical lines. Everything has to be slanted. No 90-degree angles. It's just, it works so well in this movie. I could watch it 10 million times. All right, we'll move on. 1999, Stir of Echoes. This is another one based on a Richard Matheson book. This movie, this one kind of takes another approach to the whole haunted house thing. So Kevin Bacon gets sort of hypnotized. And what happens is this hypnotism awakens something in him. It awakens a sixth sense. And he and his wife and his young child they rent this house. And his young child seems to have, he seems to shine a little bit. And there's something at the back of his head, Kevin Bacon, there's something kind of itching at, something bugging him. He can't put his finger on it at first, and it consumes him. He's obsessed. And this is a movie you have to get all the way through for a lot of things to eventually make sense. This is a movie I just don't see people talking about a lot. This movie's so good. I haven't seen it in a long time. I obviously need to rewatch it. So good. All right. 1999, House on Haunted Hill. Another, Shirley Jackson one. But this one, this one's fun. This one is an exact remake of the 1959 William Castle movie. Now, if you don't know who William Castle was, his movies were kind of like exhibitions. You would go to the theaters and they were an all-encompassing experience. If in the scene there's someone breathing on the back of someone's neck, there would be a mechanism that would puff air on the back of your neck. If on the screen, like if you try to watch William Castle movies now, it's like, because they were made for this multi-sensory experience. So there's a lot of like things flying at the screen. And, when you're in the theater and something's flying at the screen, there would actually be a ghost going down the aisles of the theater. It was very immersive. And so they made this one. And this one has a very interesting cast. And they had a lot of fun with it. It's very 1999. They had a lot of fun with it. And it's the same premise as the book and as, the 1963 one I talked about. It doesn't it's not that it doesn't take it seriously, but it's also having a little more fun with it than The Haunting. And this is one of those movies. It's just fun. It's very 1999. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I say it's very 1999, just watch it. I promise you'll get it. Let's see. Oh, The Others, 2001. This is one of those kind of quiet horror movies. This is a very gothic as hell, but I remember when this movie came out and watching it, and you know, the internet existed back then, but it wasn't so easy to find information. And I went into it cold, knowing nothing. Nobody had talked to me about it, and being really confused. And this isn't a movie where there's a huge shock at the end. They let the reality of what's actually going on slowly dawn on you. And that slow grasp of what's actually going on has its own element of horror to it, where you're like, oh, it has its own sensation, as opposed to the boom, there's the big surprise. This slowly understanding. It very effective. And I think this movie doesn't get talked about a lot because it is very, very soft. This is a very gentle horror movie, but this is also a very effective haunting movie. And there are scenes where Nicole Kidman's character in particular is afraid and kind of freaking out and running from things that you can feel the tension. It's a very well done movie. All right, also in 2001, 13 Ghosts. Now this is a remake of another William Castle movie. The William Castle movie was made in 1960, and it's called 13 Ghosts. This one, I love this movie. This one is a very... Boy, they went for it. They really went for it in this. The way some people die in this, and with this movie, so it is a haunted house, but it was a house that was made haunted to serve a sort of higher purpose. Not a good higher purpose, mind you, but a higher purpose nonetheless. And Tony Shalhoub is so good in this. I mean, you're used to seeing Tony Shalhoub in a certain way. You're used to seeing Tony Shalhoub as a character, and he's not a character in this. He's a man. He is a broken, grieving man in this, and his reactions to a lot of these horrifying things that he sees, to the thought that his children are being threatened, they're in danger. This is a movie that could have been all cheeseball, over the top horror, over the top gore, over the top imagery, which it is, and it's fantastic. But they also did a really good job of kind of squeezing in that emotional element, that human element. And I think this is a fantastic movie. All right, 2002, Ju-on, The Grudge. So Ju-on, it's a Japanese sort of series. And The Grudge is the third part in this series. Now, this is a haunted movie, and it's really good. Like, the imagery, the thing about... So, like, if you watch Japanese horror and Korean horror, and I'm going to talk about a Korean horror here in a second, as opposed to Western storytelling style, we like a build. We like to reach a climax. What a lot of Japanese storytelling, especially when we're talking about horror, they like to hit a pitch early on and then maintain it. And it has its own sort of feel to it, its own level of horror to it, by maintaining it. To where, like, I've watched Korean horror movies and had to go to bed afterwards, been exhausted because the tension is set and I feel it, I'm in it, and it's woo! So they do that in The Grudge. It's set early on and it's just maintained, and that's a lot of work to have to maintain this tension, this terror. My only complaint is in the maintaining of this, there are certain sounds in this movie that get old real quick. Certain images that's like, okay, I get it. But having said that, this is a scary movie. Like, this is a movie that kind of actually, like, even for me, where I say nothing really scares me anymore, this movie got under my skin. Totally good. If you haven't seen it, absolutely watch it. Okay, also in 2002, a movie called Darkness. This is a movie I don't see people talk about. So it has a young Anna Paquin in it. Also, Ian Glenn is in this. Now, you'll have to look him up, but you know him. He's one of those faces you know. This movie is messed up. The ending especially, where you're just like... This movie, yeah. Where they spend the entire movie trying to fight. It's kind of like a prophecy, where they're trying to fight it, they're trying to get out of it, and in doing so, in the fighting, they end up making it come true. And it's real messed up how that happens. So this is a good movie. It is a haunted house movie, but it's more... It's not a haunted, like... So, okay. In a lot of these lists, while I was researching this to make sure, I get a good list, the Insidious movies were referenced a lot. And I understand why they're referenced, but to my head, to my mind, the Insidious movies aren't haunted house movies. They're haunted person movies. So we've got the character who's haunted, where the spirit is kind of chasing him and latching onto him. It's sort of the same in Darkness, but not, because it's got far-reaching effects, and it does start with this house. So that's why I added this and not the Insidious movies. By the way, though, the Insidious movies, I love all three of them. Some more than others, but those, like, I don't have a lot of love for a lot of horror movies made in the last 20 years. I don't know. There aren't a lot where I've been like, okay, this will make top 10 for me forever. This one blows quite a few of them out of the water. I don't feel that way, but the Insidious movies are like, yeah, they make top 10 for me. Yeah, they're really good. So, yes, Darkness, very good movie. All of this will be listed down below in the description box, as usual, so don't worry. So what we have next is a movie from 2003 called A Tale of Two Sisters. This is a South Korean movie, so what we've got the pitch hitting early. This is a movie where just fucking everything is wrong. And we've got familiar relationships where things are wrong. We've got these two sisters who are just coming back from a mental institution, and their father has married this real bitchy woman who's uptight and not nice, and boy, they hate her. And there's this new house that is very obviously haunted. Like, a lot of these movies, like I said before, there's the psychological aspect of it, of, is this your broken mind, or is it actually a haunting? No, this one's haunting. This one's haunting. And it's creepy, and the imagery is creepy, and the actresses do an amazing job of being creeped out and just kind of exhausted. Like, there's such a feeling of like, can this be over for these characters? And you feel it. You're just like, please, can we get a break? These poor things. It's a really good movie. 2007, Paranormal Activity. I have absolutely no interest in watching a single one of the sequels, but this is a very solid movie. For what it is, this is a very solid movie. I like this movie. I don't know how many times I'll sit and rewatch it, having gotten through all of it, but the first time I watched it, it was, God, they were probably on the fourth one by the time I actually sat down and watched the first one. But I was surprised and I was impressed. This is a good movie. 2012, Sinister. Ethan Hawke and Mr. Boogie. God, this movie. This is one where I had a blanket around me watching this movie. True crime writer moves into a house where horrible murders happen, thinking it'll help him write a book. First of all, what the fuck? Why would you do that? But second of all, 8mm movies in the attic, which are really, my God, they're graphic, and the whole thing going down. And another one, there's research that goes on, I love it. And Mr. Boogie. I know he's got another name because it is an entity, but the calling of Mr. Boogie, but little kids, oh my God. And also the little kids aspect. Oh my God. I think little kids can be creepy sometimes. All right, last one, Crimson Peak 2015. So this is a movie, I don't necessarily love the story that much, but I love the way this movie looked. I love the sounds. I love the individual shots. The house itself. The house itself, where it's on this red clay earth, and the house is kind of sinking into it. And there's a part in this grand foyer when you first enter the house where the floor is rotting because the house is sinking, and it actually looks like the floor is bleeding. And I think about that sometimes. Now, I can't really put my finger on why the story doesn't work for me. If you were to sit me down and recount to me the story of this, where it's a nefarious brother and sister, they're trying to jack money out of people, and there's all these dead people in the house, and dead babies too, and if you told me the pieces of the movie, I would be very interested in watching it. And it's not that I'm adverse to a gothic paranormal romance. It just didn't work for me. And again, I can't quite put my finger on why, because on the surface, this seems to be right up my alley. But something about it didn't work for me. Now, that doesn't mean that it wouldn't work for you. Again, I'm putting it on this list because I fucking love the way it looks. But the story just didn't do it for me. But if you haven't seen it, give it a try, because it is very well done. It is so visually stunning, and I think it is worth your time to watch it, even if you end up not liking it like me. I watched it once, that was enough for me. But I mean, it's one of those things I absolutely think is worth your time. So that's 20 movies. I will be back next week with the books, and I'm really excited for that one because I love reading about haunted houses. I love reading about haunted houses way more than I love watching them on TV. And considering, that the setting is usually a character in the story, that would make it perfect for movies. And I love it, but the books do it way more for me. So we'll talk about that next week. I hope everybody's doing okay. The world sometimes is doing okay, sometimes it's not. So I hope you're doing okay. I hope it's consistent for you. And thank you for being here with me. And I will be back next week talking about